So Robert Smith was born in Mobile, Alabama, and grew up in eastern Mississippi around Columbus and Quitman. He currently lives in Biloxi, Mississippi with his wife and daughter. He received his Bachelor of Science in Forestry with a Wildlife Management option from Mississippi State and his Master's of Science in Forest Ecology from University of Georgia. He has worked extensively with private landowners to integrate economic uses of land, forestry, agriculture development, and ecotourism with habitat restoration and biodiversity. He is also passionate about photography of all kinds of plants and animals and has organized and led many photographic tours and workshops focused on our natural world. His images are widely used in natural resource management presentations, as well as in books and magazines, and there are even a few hanging in homes and other buildings in the local area. So thanks, Robert, again for joining us today, and you can kick us off whenever you're ready.
All right, we'll see if we can open my slideshow here and get it rolling. So what I wanted to talk about today was some helpful hints and keys to creating more appealing images. So what's the most important part of the camera gear that you can have, and is it the camera body, or is it a lens, a big long lens like that one, or the tripod that holds it up, or the flash and accessories? And no, it's really not any of those things. It's a nut. It's the nut behind the viewfinder, because we're the ones that make all the decisions when we start taking pictures. The camera and everything else really doesn't do that. It's us. And so the important thing for us is to better understand our equipment, whether it's reading the manual that comes with our camera or with our cell phone. And sometimes that's an online manual. And a lot of times there's an aftermarket user's guide as well. Even for a lot of our high-end cell phones now, there are additional apps and books and ebooks that you can get to learn more about how to use your camera on the cell phone. And the cameras are you can get a lot more out of your camera, no matter what kind of phone it is or camera it is, if you understand what it can do and how you can use certain situations. We're not going to get into a lot of detail about cameras today and how to use cameras, but we're going to go over some basics of how to create better pictures. And those basics apply whether it's a cell phone or point and shoot or a digital single lens reflex camera. I use all three at times, and what's really funny is this morning I guess last week I had submitted some pictures to a magazine, and it's an article about an easement, a conservation easement we're putting on a piece of property. And I wanted some pictures of the Mississippi sandhill cranes that were using the property. And I submitted some, but I knew I had some that one of our Natural Resources Conservation Service partners had taken out the window of my truck with his cell phone. And those are the pictures they're actually going to use. They're high enough quality, and the birds were right there outside the window. And so those are the ones that will actually end up being used in the article. So it's, the most important camera you've got is the one that you've got with you, which more and more commonly is our cell phone. So the things that we talk about today are rules of thumb. They're not strict mandates. They're not never to be broken. These are things that you do these things, and most of the time it'll kind of work out. And anytime somebody wants to jump in and ask a question, feel free. And right now can't see any of the messages on the side of the screen. But just jump in and say, hold up, Robert. Let me repeat that, or slow down, or whatever. So every one of these rules and thumb should be broken under some circumstances. So what I'm talking about is just here's what kind of works most of the time. We're going to talk about light. We're going to talk about composition. We're going to talk about perspective, thinking about backgrounds. We're going to talk about color selection. We're going to talk about, but my picture's blurry. We're going to talk about poses, and these are true for people and for critters. We're going to talk about pre-visualization. What kind of picture do I want to take? We're going to talk a little bit about exposure. So the first thing is light. These are two pictures of a white oak acorn. Same acorn, same setup. The only difference is the light. And with cameras, that's what it is. It's all about the light with pictures. You can give me bad light and a great subject, and it's hard to take a good picture of it. But you give a photographer great light and a mediocre subject, and he can take a great picture of that mediocre subject. And the most important thing is to think about the light and how it's on the subject and how you can use the light. The light quantity, how much light there is. Generally we need to have enough light so the camera can act quickly. The quality, if it's hard or soft, if it's a bright spotlight shining on something, or if it's a very diffuse light. The temperature of the light. And a lot of times we don't think about light temperature, but if you go look at light bulbs, there's a light temperature on those light bulbs, and they might be natural white light or sunlight, or it might be, 3,000 degrees Kelvin, a warm red light, or it might be a fluorescent light that's on the more cooler blue side. And so what kind of light is lighting up the subject has a lot to do with the feel for how the image would look. What direction is the light coming from? Is it filling the shadows? Is it creating shadows? And you don't want to get rid of all the shadows, but shadows provide depth. Or do we have multiple sources of light? Something we need to balance. Do we have a tungsten light coming from a big street light out there and some natural light coming from the sun still? It just depends. So this acre on the left is natural light just as it existed. The one on the right, there's a diffuser over it and then a golden reflector like you see them when they take model pictures and those kinds of things, throwing that warm golden light back up on the acorn. You can see where the reflector's off on the right-hand side and pushing the sunlight back against it. We've got a little darker shadow over there to the left of the acorn. Now, that's the only difference between the two pictures. Those two pictures, I'm not going to say one's better than the other, but they might have different uses. When you take a picture, you generally want the light coming from over your shoulder. That way your subject is well lit. The light's coming from behind you. You don't want the light throwing your shadow on the subject most of the time. But if the light's coming from behind you, it's not going to be backlit. You're not going to have to use fill flash to get details to show up. Light coming over your shoulder is your friendly light. Early morning or late evening's good. And a lot of people say when it's cloudy, I can't take any pictures today. It's cloudy. Some of those cloudy, overcast days, as long as you've got enough light to take a decent picture, are when you get your best pictures, because there's no deep shadows that hide things. Everything is pretty well evenly lit. And that's what you want. You want even lighting. You don't want patchy lighting where you've got a lot of little patches of shadow and bright sunlight. It's really hard to work with. Most of the cameras see about 2 to 4 stops less of light than we see with our eyes. And so when you see a picture, what you see with your eyes when you look outside right now in this near noon with bright light, we might have 7 to 9 stops of light out there between the deepest, darkest shadows and the most sunlit thing. And our cameras might be able to capture 4 or 6 of those stops of light. And when you don't have enough capability in your camera to capture all those stops of light that are out there, something's going to be overexposed, bright white blown out highlights, or underexposed, deep black with no detail. And so it doesn't look like what it looks like to our eyes. And so we want to avoid that patchy lighting by shooting at different times of the day, or even using fill flash. Sometimes we don't think about it, but using flash during a bright day, what that flash does is it may fill the darkest 2 stops of light. So instead of having 9 stops of light out there in the real world, we fill 2 stops of those light of shadow with fill flash, and now we've only got 7, and our camera can see the whole thing. Typically, when I'm working with fill flash, I might set it somewhere between -1 2/3 or -2 1/3 if I'm trying to use flash. And if you've got a camera where you can adjust flash or flash compensation, that's what it is. On a lot of our camera phones, you've got use flash as main light or fill flash. And so what they've got is the fill flash set somewhere around -2 or so. It just fills the darkest shadows that are in the image. Composition. When we start thinking about, and this is a mold king snake, one of the king snakes that we don't see very often. What we think about composition, we think about the rule of thirds. And that could be also called the golden mean, the Fibonacci spiral, golden ratio, Fibonacci ratio. But basically, it's easiest to think about if you take the image, whether it's horizontal like this one or vertical, and draw a tic-tac-toe board across it. You want things to happen at the intersections of those lines. That's where you want the eyes. That's where you want the head. That's where you want, in this case, we've got the body of the snake going across there. We've got the snake kind of coiled up there, the eyes there, the tongue's almost touching another one. And that makes images like this work because it pleases our eyes. Another thing we can use is leading lines. This is a Tracy's threadleaf sundew. It's one of our carnivorous plants down here in coastal Mississippi and Alabama. This is the bloom for it. And so we've got what we call an indeterminate inflorescence. This one blooms and this one blooms, this one blooms, and it's just going to keep blooming until it gets through blooming. But all those buds, flower buds, lead your eye back up to the main bloom. And so a leading line help lead your eye to the subject. If you can think about how to compose something with a leading line. This is a male painted bunting in my backyard, and this is an example of natural framing. We've got an overhanging branch. In this case, we've got little branches all around the bird, but it might be an overhanging branch looking out on the Gulf or a water body, or it might be a tree trunk coming down one side and something else coming down another side, something to focus the eye back on the subject. Complementary colors, the opposite colors on color wheels, blue and green, blue and orange, red and green. When we can, and this is a fire-bellied toad, an exotic on a piece of glass here, but the green and red typically go really well together. So when you think about trying to have colors that complement each other. One of the big things that it's never a big deal until you suddenly realize that you want the water to be level. A pair of kayakers in Sioux Bayou over here on the Pascagoula River. It looks like they're sliding off the page to the left when the horizon wasn't straight. And the horizon in this case being the marsh line and the tree line, the marsh through there. Same thing out in Galveston Bay, wade fishing for fish. The Gulf is fairly flat, or the Gulf looks like it's sliding off the page. And that's something that really bothers a lot of people once you know it. Notice that kind of thing is there. And so make sure the water line is level in the pictures. Line it up with tick marks on the edge of your screen, or crop it to where it's level later. So when we start to take a picture of something, do we want to take a horizontal, a portrait, or a landscape, or a vertical, a portrait type picture? Which way do we twist the camera or the phone to take the picture? Whatever we do, we want to make sure it's got a little Fibonacci spiral in there, and we've got that rule of thirds working. But do you shoot a horizontal or vertical? And the bottom line is, if you've got a vertical subject, shoot it vertically. If you've got a horizontal subject, shoot it horizontally. But a professional photographer will say, when do you shoot the vertical? And they say the answer is right after you shoot the horizontal. Shoot it both ways. And have them both in your files as background case, whichever one is needed by the editor. Because a lot of times, if somebody's putting together a web page or a magazine article, one format may work better than the other. One may work best standalone, but in the context of the article or web page, the other type might work. So this is a little nymph grasshopper on an aster, and that's shooting it horizontally. And so this is how I kind of work a subject. There's the grasshopper horizontal. There's the grasshopper vertically. I could have put it in the middle. I could have, I guess it's still horizontal, but it's off to the left on the rule of thirds. And why would you? And here he is vertically, where it builds up. And this is how I would typically shoot that grasshopper if I were shooting that grasshopper and flower. And so why would you shoot it way off to the left? It's not even on the line of thirds. It's way off to the left. And so I might shoot this one as well. And so this one's sitting in the file so I can use it in a PowerPoint presentation like this one and put text over here, or what they call the inside spread of a magazine. The middle of the magazine running down the middle of the page and the text above it and off to the side. And that's the kind of thing where you put a picture behind the whole article. And then here's how, getting in tight and fill up the frame with the subject of the little nymph grasshopper. You can still tell he's on an aster. And, so that's typically how I would shoot a subject: horizontally, vertically, give it a lot of room on right side and left side, zoom in, try different pieces and parts, fill the frame with what's important. Perspective. Too many times when we take a picture of something outside, we take a picture standing up, we look down at it and click the camera and move on. If you want the photo to have impact, you need to get eye to eye with it. When you shoot a little kid, get down, kneel down, get eye level. When you shoot a baby goat, get down, get eye level. when you shoot a snake or a little frog, lay down and get eye level. And you shooting at or below eye level the pictures tend to have a lot more impact than pictures taken looking down at something. Here's some examples even with plants. Here's a water lily, and this picture was taken at back behind the building where Larissa and I, where we worked together at Grand Bay. The only way to get a picture of a wild water lily is to get down there and get eye level with it. So that was a lady took a picture of me while I was taking the picture of that water lily. Similarly, this is a green flower orchid. It's our only orchid in the deep south, north of, in the temperate deep south. You get down to South Florida, and there's some other native orchids that grow in trees, but this is our only arboreal orchid in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. So this is a little orchid that grows in trees. The only way you can get an eye level shot of it is to get in the tree with it. This one happened to be on a live oak growing over the Pascagoula River. Here's a snowy egret out chasing minnows in a tide pool. My camera is on a little thing I call a ski pod that's way down low. I'm laying on the sand on my belly, and I'm below that snowy egret's eye level, and it creates a perspective that you don't get by standing up and shooting down on the bird. So how a camera works is based on physics. This is the formula to calculate true hyperfocal distance. And hyperfocal distance is how to get the most area in focus in an image. What f-stop do you need to use, and how far out do you need to focus to get everything in focus? And that's something that you're really worried about if you're doing a landscape or something like that. There's some hyperfocal distance tables and things for different camera bodies and lenses, and we'll figure that out at some other point. Let's not talk about that kind of math. Let's talk about other math. This other math is if something doesn't add to the image, it takes away or subtracts from the image. These are mating eastern narrowmouth toads, or a little toad, uncommon toad that's native down here in the deep south. And they breed during heavy rainfalls, and there they're breeding in looks like a lot like this male on the left, where he's got his throat sac blown up and he's wah, wah, calling and trying to attract a mate. And they get in the dirtiest, nastiest little edge where all the stuff is blown up, and that's where they lay their eggs. This here on the right, where the male and the female are in amplexus, look just like the area on the left. And the area on the left, that little red line running through the picture, is a longleaf pine needle. That shows you how small these guys are. And I took a longleaf pine needle and started moving everything away from this pair on the left and scooting it out of the water, out of the way. And that's not how it really works in real life. They're really in these areas where you got all that material and debris all around them. But it creates a better picture not having all that in the picture. And whenever I got ready to move that little piece of Ludwigia seed pod out from under the female's left arm, she decided she'd had enough, and she jumped away. The male still hung on. They went ahead and, I guess, finished breeding and laid their eggs, and everybody was happy. But the point of these pictures are, if something doesn't add to the image, it takes away from the image. And so, get in tight, get in on the subject. Think about what's in the background. We'll talk more about backgrounds in a minute. Think about how it looks. And if there's something in the picture that doesn't support the story you're trying to tell, then it takes away from the story you're trying to tell. If the backgrounds need to be added to the story, this is another one of those Tracy's threadleaf sundews, and this is a kind of what I would call a portrait picture of one of the blossoms on a rainy morning. It was actually drizzling rain when I took the picture. It's a pretty little flower, and that's probably a better picture of a Tracy's threadleaf sundew than this one. But this other one tells another story. Those are blooming pale pitcher plants in the back. Yellow trumpet pitcher plants in the background. This tells us that this threadleaf sundew is growing in a pitcher plant bog. It tells more to the story. An artist or a magazine editor may like the one on the left better. An ecologist may like the one on the right better. The bottom line is I've got both of them. The further the background is away from the subject, the less distracting it is. And so if you're trying to get a nice smooth background, make sure it's further away from the subject. In this case, the subject and the background haven't moved. What I did was I adjusted the f-stop on the camera. More wide open apertures or lower f-stop numbers result in smoother, cleaner backgrounds. You can get the same thing by having the background further away. So if you want the background to help support the story and be part of the story, having the subject closer to the background is important, and having a big depth of field is important. If you don't want the background distracting from your subject, trying to make sure it's as far away from the subject as possible, and using a shallower depth of field can help you get there. One of the other things we see a lot is light poles and fence poles growing out of people's heads when we take pictures. And it's not just people. This is a yellow burr clover on the side of the road. And I was taking pictures of it and looked, and you can see this white spot just between the burr clover and the leaves there. That was a little white piece of granite that came off the edge of the road. I reached back there with my hand and took that little white piece of granite and moved it out of the picture for the second one. And that white stuff isn't distracting. It makes a prettier picture. That's what I call manual Photoshop. Doing your landscaping around your subject before you snap the picture. You don't go back afterwards in Photoshop and try to clone out and remove all that light colored stuff. Let's just take it out of the picture to start with. And sometimes we can do that by moving our position. And other times we can do it by removing whatever's in the picture. Here's another example. This is a perch I've got in my backyard close to a bird feeder. The bird on the left is a female red-winged blackbird, and you can see the little line going behind her head. That was a muscadine vine that had fallen down, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. And so I finally took the vine and pruned it. And this is a female rose-breasted grosbeak on the same perch, but you can see that without that horizontal line through there, it is a little bit more pleasing of an image. So just think about what's behind your subject. Colors, thinking about colors. Have your subject wear bright colors. That's something, I don't do often. I don't have very many bright colors. Pretty much 90% of my closet is full of olive drabs and tans and browns and greens and camouflage. And I like to sit there and blend in. But if, a bright yellow jacket, a bright yellow hard hat, a bright blue jacket, a bright red jacket, a bright yellow jacket, something that stands out. This guy on the left was our one of our coastal workers down here for Wildlife Mississippi, and we were looking at a head cut gully. And so he got down in the head cut showing, a year ago where he was standing with solid ground, and the rains have washed the soil out from under all those roots and things. And he got down that yellow blue poncho there, really helps him stand out. Other things to think about, complementary colors again, orange and blue. This photo on the right is a Tanzanian red-clawed scorpion, and they're really brown in real life. And it's a gray Rockies on. But under ultraviolet light, it's got the orange and blue and makes a pretty cool picture, makes a cool ultraviolet picture as well. But, again, thinking about complementary colors when you can. So if you've got two people together and have a red-green jacket and a green jacket, hey, that's pretty cool. Blurriness. My pictures are also blurry. You can see this is a great Kiskadee taking a drink of water from a little pond in South Texas. And somebody says, my picture's out of focus. So we look at that picture. The water in front of the bird's in focus. It's in focus all the way up through his feet and all the way back through about where his tail starts. He starts to get out of focus, out of the depth of field there. And so the water at the tip of his beak's frozen, so it's not out of focus. It's not causing the blurriness there. Is it truly out of focus, or is it something else? And so it's not out of focus. The camera moved. When you're shooting with a digital single lens reflex, the rule of thumb is your shutter speed needs to be 1 over the focal length of the lens. So I'm shooting, let's say I'm with a 200 millimeter lens, I need 1/200 second shutter speed to hold it, is the rule of thumb. And that can vary a little bit. But so if I've got 1/100th of a second, a lot of times my picture will be blurry. I need at least 1/200th or faster, 1/250th, 1/300th, 1/400th. So in this case, I was shooting this off of a tripod. It's not the camera that moved, because if the camera moved, the whole thing would be blurry. The subject moved. And so that's what's happened here is this. I was shooting at about 1/800th of a second here, which was fast enough to freeze the movement of water dripping out of his beak, but I needed about 1/1200th of a second to freeze his head movement. That's about how fast your camera needs to be moving, how fast your shutter needs to be moving to freeze a bird's movement, whether it's his head jerking around or whether it's his wings flapping. You need 1,000th to 1/1200th of a second to reliably freeze most birds' wings. And sometimes the picture's just soft because you've got a fungus on your lens, or you've got got dew on your lens, or your lens is fogged up, there may be something else causing the image to be solved. So a lot of times people say my picture's out of focus. It's not really that their picture is out of focus. There's something else causing the blurriness. Poses. If you've got taken a picture of somebody, and it doesn't matter whether it's a person or a female cardinal, quartering towards the camera is a lot of times a good choice. So you're not facing straight onto the camera, you're not sideways to the camera, you're kind of 45-degree angle to the camera. You're kind of quartering towards the camera. And so here's an example from a cardinal. This is true of almost every bird picture I've ever taken. This bird is actually looking a little bit away from the camera, and lots of people say that's a good picture. The only reason I kept it is for something like this. Here, the cardinal is parallel to the camera, the back of the camera, and that's something that we all think of as it's going to be in the plane of focus. Everything's going to look good, and it does look good. But here she is. She's got her quartering towards the camera. That's really the shot where it looks best. In most cases, is where they're quartering towards the camera, whether it's a person or a critter. The other thing is eye contact. Here's a orange crown warbler and a Chinese tallow tree. Great detail on the warbler, but we can't even see its eye, and that makes that not such a good picture. Here's a better picture of the same bird in the same tree. You can even see a little bit of hint of the orange crown up there, which is unusual to see in orange crown warblers in real life. And we can see the eye, but we don't have a reflection in there. That reflection really adds that spark of life. And I can add a reflection to that one in Photoshop, which is something I've not done with this image. But here's the eye contact with that reflection, with that catch light. Same bird, same tree. Don't see the orange crown quite as good in this image, but it had moved around where we had the sun reflecting in the corner of its eye, and that really makes it a more lifelike picture and more appealing picture. Action, the critter doing something. In this case, it's a marbled godwit pulling a worm out of a tidal flat, or a male wood duck flapping and drying off after he's taken a bath. Things in action make the picture. And again, we've got eye contact in both of those images. Here's a gopher tortoise. Again, eye contact, gopher tortoise eating in a young longleaf plantation. You see his little pink tongue out there. He's moving. He's doing something that's just not a static gopher tortoise picture. This is the least-term breeding bird colony on the Mississippi coast outside of Biloxi here. And I knew that when I took this picture, I wanted to get a picture. I knew the adults were coming back and feeding the chicks, and I laid there on the sand outside the protected area with the longest lens I had and focused on this little chick and kept waiting for the adult to come bring it some food, and it finally did. And I knew what kind of picture I wanted before I took it. Know what you want it to look like before you softly depress the shutter release. And sometimes it takes a long time. I've got a friend right now that's been sitting in a blind from daylight to dark for the last 37 days. He can't tell me what he's there to take a picture of. Won't even tell me where he's at. He does a lot of film work for the British Broadcasting Company and some other people, and he's stayed in blinds for weeks before trying to get wood ducks jumping out of their cavity and stuff like that. But he's been in a blind for 37 days. I don't think I'd have the patience. Of course, I guess he's getting paid by the day. But sometimes, just taking the picture and moving on, you need to invest some time in waiting for things to happen to get the picture you want. Select the tools and settings you want to create the image you want. This is a little Enothera, a little sun drop, a little, I can't think of something rose is one of the other common names, sun rose, sun drop. I knew they were blooming down the road from my house, so I waited till a good morning with lots of dew and went down there and took the picture, and used my macro lens so I could get in close. I knew what I wanted. You can spray a plant with a mister and get little drops on it, but they're not these different shaped little drops, all so separated in things like a reel do. Anticipate what's going to happen. I could see these two bucks out there feeding in a little prairie area, and it's before the rut. Obviously, they're still in velvet. I knew they'd eventually move together to interact in some way, and so I sat there and waited until they did move together to interact, and they went through some mutual grooming. And so, I anticipated they would move together. I kept the light over my shoulder. I kept waiting for it to happen, and it finally did. Um, wait for the action to happen. And particularly if you're taking pictures of people, don't be afraid to ask people to move. Can you move 2 feet to your left? Can you face me a little bit more? Can you do something different? Getting into camera technical pieces, there's 3 pieces that make up how an image looks, and that's the aperture, shutter speed, and the ISO, or International Standards Organization, rating for how fast the shutter, or how fast the film, which would be ASA, the American Standards Association, but the International Standards Organization is the one that rates the. I'm trying to think of what to call it. How light sensitive the piece in your camera is that records the image, and you can adjust ISO on most phones now, most cameras now. But the ISO impacts noise. You want higher ISOs when it's darker, and you start to get a little bit more noise in the picture then. And so if it's got good light, you want as low of an ISO as possible. The aperture, or f-stop, impacts the depth of field. Having a wide open aperture, a low f number, f2, f4, gives you a shallow depth of field. Having a high f number, f22, f32, gives you a big depth of field. And shutter speed, if we've got a fast shutter speed, then we can freeze action, 800th, 1000th, 1200th of a second. If we've got a slow shutter speed, we can let things blur and give it a feeling of motion. Okay, so let's run through the thought process of what it looks like when we want to go take a picture. Here's a butterfly bush. Look, a flower. And we took a picture and moved on. That's what I probably did anytime I had a camera when I was preteen and early teenager. But get down. I'm down lower. I'm down on the flower's level. That's a little bit better picture of the flower now. Then I got close, got up on one blossom. That's a better picture of the bottle brush flower there. Then I choose a single good blossom, and that looks a little bit better. And change the lens that focuses closer, where I could get even closer, and I blurred out part of the background now that was not really supporting the image. And that's a bottle brush flower, and I can see why it's called a bottle brush flower now. Then I optimize camera composition a little bit, and always leave room to crop in case you're not printing at a 4x6. Consider the background. This is a southern magnolia leaf in the bottle brush tree, and it's a distracting background. So we did some manual Photoshop and take the southern magnolia leaf out of the thing. Choose the best depth of field. We're back there, right there on the picture. Then diffuse the bright light. So I used a diffuser, which is basically a white sheet held up between the sun and the object, and that gave us a more even lighting to it. It's not a good picture now, because the diffusers don't always just give you a good picture. If you see the blue thing in the bottom of the picture, that's what we call a plant clamp. And it's a little movable clamp. It's got a hole in there where it doesn't crush a stem or anything, but you can loop it around the plant stem, and it keeps the plant stem from blowing in the wind. But so now we've diffused the bright light, and then we reflected some gold light back on it, and that made it diffusing the light, making everything even. Then putting some directed gold light in there with a reflector helped. Added some fill flash, that helped a little bit more. Then we hit it with a mister, just a plain old water bottle like you get it at Walmart or Home Depot, and that helped it even more. And then we run it through our digital optimization procedure, where I go through and crop it and make it a pretty picture. And so that's the same bottle brush tree. And all these pictures were taken within about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of each other at one time, specifically for this kind of talk. And so that's the difference between a snapshot and an image in my mind. And so throwing together a bunch of these things we've talked about can help you create better images that help you tell the story a little bit better. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, there are a bunch of questions in the chat. I think I'll just pick a few that a lot of people kind of asked. Let me see my list here. Yeah, I think Cody had some good ones. We had a lot of people asking about editing, and Cody had a question about apps for editing. If you want to ask that one, Cody.
Yeah, let me find my question real quick. I use the app Snapseed with Google for editing on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a recommendation for an editing program, whether it's on a phone or a computer?
I use the powerhouse Adobe Creative Cloud. because it does everything. It does. I probably don't use 10% of what it's got available, but I've not found anything else that does everything it does. And so, just because of the sheer number of images I end up working with, I use Adobe Photoshop. There are some plugins, some Nik software, and some other plugins to Photoshop that I use at times. And I look at the things on the one thing that I look at a lot of the apps that go with the cameras on the phone is they're called what I would call a destructive app. When you use some of those apps, it alters a picture permanently. And so what I do is when I shoot a picture, I shoot it in what we call RAW format or native format for the camera. And that way I've got as much information as I can. So if I need to do something to it later on, I've got a basic good starting point for anything. So even if I know I want to use it for something right now, I go ahead and shoot it for RAW and save that big, huge file where I've got that file as a starting point for anything in the future. So I don't use that many apps on the phone to do things in shortcut because I lose control over it. That's just me.
Right, and that's why I use Snapseed, because it allows you to take a raw picture and then edit it. Pretty much, from what I could tell, you can edit it in just about any way, shape, or form. You can change perspective, you can change white balance, temperature, and everything, and it doesn't just throw a filter over the picture as you're taking it.
Yeah.
So on that same note, Boris had a question about editing. I think you kind of answered some of this, but Boris, you want to ask your question?
Hey, you pretty much answered it. My question was just like, how often do you edit? And you pretty much covered it when you were talking about the different like shots you have to take, depending on like what it's for, the different kind of shot itself.
Yep. I mean, if I spend more than 2 minutes editing a picture, I've spent a lot of time with a picture. I try to get everything I can right in the camera to start with. And there are times that I may spend 10 or 15 minutes with a picture, but that's really, really unusual. The picture's got to be pretty important for me to spend that long doing something to it. I try to get it right in camera to start with. That said, I also use an editing program, do it in Photoshop most of the time, to attach. So when you take a picture, there's metadata associated with the picture. It talks about what time the picture is taken, what camera the picture is taken with, what lens, all these kinds of things. But I also add some cameras are enabled with GPS, so it also gives you a latitude, longitude, or UTM coordinate where the picture was taken. But I also go back in there and I add in where, the place name, city, county, state, a park, if it was at a park. I add the names of what's in the picture, the common names and the scientific names, and then any activity that's going on there, so that those things are describable, and I can find those images later if I need to. If I'm looking for a picture of a common yellowthroat building a nest, I can type in common yellowthroat nest and see if I have any in my files.
Awesome. And then I guess we're gonna keep with the same. We'll go from software to hardware because Austin and Camille both have the same question. I guess Austin, you want to ask your question?
I was asking, what would you recommend for us, somebody starting off photography, especially when it's a hobby, or like what would you consider necessities out in the field?
Basically, a camera, a lens is where you start. And in today's world, there are 3 camera systems I would look at. I would look at Canon, Nikon, and Olympus. Sony, I guess. I would look at those 4 camera systems. Canon and Nikon tend to have a whole lot more options because they're the big dogs in the show. And if you look at both Canon, Olympus, and Nikon, they've got what they call a consumer level camera, they've got a prosumer level camera, and they've got a professional level camera. And the entry level consumer level cameras do a good job. The cameras we've got available now for 150, 200 bucks, brand new, do so much more than the $500, $800 cameras, professional cameras that I started out with 40 years ago. It's not even funny. And so the cheap cameras we've got now do so much more. The prosumer and the professional levels, they tend to be a little bit more waterproof, tend to be a little bit better suited for field work. You don't tend to break them as much. They tend to have more metal parts in their bodies. They tend to be a little bit more dust proof and weather resistant, but I won't call them waterproof, but weather resistant. But so, I'd get a Canon, a Nikon, and Olympus in my hand, see which one fits my hands better, see which one the menu system is more intuitive, which one I understand better. They're all going to take the same kind of pictures. Again, getting back to my very first set of slides there, it's not the camera, it's the nut behind the viewfinder that controls what the camera does. You can give somebody that's a decent photographer any kind of camera, and they can turn out a decent picture. But so what I would do for the money right now, if I were going to invest in a camera, I would buy a used camera that might be 4 or 5 years behind what's currently out there, and I'd buy a used prosumer level camera. The good place to find out what cameras do and to do a comparison of what cameras do is dpreview.com. That's DP, Delta, Papa, Romeo, Echo, Victor, Igloo, Echo, Whiskey.com. Digital photography review. And they've got the up-to-date specs on all the cameras that are out there. And they've got what they call a camera comparison feature where you can compare within one kind of camera. You can compare a Nikon D300 to a Nikon D850 or D810 or whatever. You can compare a Canon camera to a Nikon camera to an Olympus camera and see what they'll do. And, I'd find a good used camera. The one thing, all those guys now, basically I talk about digital single lens reflexes during most of the talk part, but there's also what they call a 4/3 camera system, or a mirrorless camera system, that Olympus and Nikon and Canon have out now, and Sony have out now, that is lighter and smaller than the DSLRs. And if I was getting started, I might go that way. Right now they're fairly expensive, but a good used prosumer body, or even a good used entry-level body. I mean, sometimes you get those things 50, 70, 85 bucks, and they do just as good of a job as they did when they cost 250 bucks in most cases. A good source for used camera gear is KEH, that's Kilo Echo Hotel.com. That's a used camera retailer out of Atlanta. But they typically, their stuff has always been as described. I've had one person that got a piece of broken gear from them and they took it back, and another person that was disappointed in what they got and they took it back, no questions asked. But that's a good, reputable used camera source.
Cool. I guess Eric had a question also about like people starting out, but on a different note. Eric, if you want to ask that one.
I sure do. Let me scroll back up.
I can go through the chat here and respond to the questions too as well, but go ahead, Eric.
It was said earlier that some of your work has been used in magazines and etc. How did you grow your network and notoriety?
It was accidental more than anything else. I didn't, when I grew up, we had a little cheap camera that used 126 film, had a little roll of film, and we took and got the prints developed, and you'd take the picture and get them back 2 weeks later. And whenever I got out of school the first time and started working for this guy, he gave me a camera in a Pelican case, and it had what was it? A Nikon 6006 with 2 lenses, had a 28-70 and a 70-300 millimeter lens in a Pelican case, and gave me a case of slide film, and put the case of slide film in the refrigerator there at work. And he told me to take a picture of every plant or animal we were coming in contact. And we were doing small mammal surveys and reptile amphibian surveys and all that kind of stuff. Everything we could catch or get close to, get a picture of. And he was using them in his reports. And he said, when you get your slides finished, when you order them, go ahead and order a duplicate set. That way you've got a set as well. And I really appreciate that guy for doing that way back then. And so when I went to my next job, we had a camera there, and I got to use the camera and take pictures and everything. And so I ended up with this slide collection. And so as I started out doing things, got on the talk circuit where I was doing talks, doing slideshows, going to meetings, telling people about how to manage properties and such. And I ended up on a deer management talk where people were paying big money to come listen to people talk about how to manage deer. And Charlie Alsheimer, who was the editor of Deer and Deer Hunting magazine, was there. He said, "Robert, you take some really good pictures." And it was a week-long course that we were at. And after we get through talking in the evening, he'd take me out there and we'd go take some pictures around the property and say, "Here's how you can make that picture better." Or we'd get through and I'd do my little slideshow. That's when still slides were in carousels. And went through my little slideshow and it'd say, "Let's go look at that picture you took there." He says, "Here's what I would do to make that picture better." So he started telling me. And so then somebody else in the audience, one of those things is, "Robert, send me those 4 slides and write a 1,200-page article talking about a 1,200-word article talking about what you just did." And so then I started submitting pictures and articles, and it just kind of grew from there. It just kind of totally, completely accidental. But now I've ended up learning that, if you're interested in publishing something somewhere, get in touch with the editor, talk to them, submit stuff, write a photo text package, and if you got a decent gift for writing and have some decent pictures to go with it, it may not make it the first time or two, but eventually you'll find a place to publish it.
Cool. Then I guess we have a little bit of time left. So I see Carrie wanted Haley to go. I think, her question's about some of the, I don't know if Haley's voice is working. Haley, are you able to speak? Maybe not. I think I'll just ask the question for her. So she says, "I'm sure photography has taken you to some pretty cool places. What's the coolest place you've ever taken a picture and the coolest picture you've ever taken?"
Wow, those are tough questions. What's really sad is my work, my biological work has taken me to some pretty cool places. I've worked from southern Canada to southern Argentina and Menlo Park, California to Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And a lot of times when I'm working, I don't have time to take pictures, which is really sad. So I've taken some pretty cool pictures. I think my favorite picture is the one I haven't taken yet, the one I'm going to take next. I've taken some pretty cool pictures of my backyard. I mean, the painted bunting that I had in this thing from the backyard. I mean, everybody goes to all these cool, iconic photographic locations and takes pictures of these things, which means everybody has pictures of them. So some of the coolest things are some of the things that we get to experience up close and personal in our own backyards that everybody takes for granted.
Maybe I missed this in your bio, but where do you live currently?
I currently live in Biloxi, Mississippi.
All right. And then I think we want to bring it back to kind of conservation. So Crane, if you want to ask your question.
Sure. I don't know where it is in the chat, but basically my question was, what role do you think photography plays in conservation, and what kind of impact does it have just in the field of like conservation work in general?
I've got a whole slideshow on conservation photography, and there's a group called the International League of Conservation Photographers. There's the old saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I've got a picture of a baby armadillo, and how you can't describe a baby armadillo without showing a picture. I mean, the pictures just describe it so much better. And people react to pictures with emotion more so than they do words, or whether the words are said or whether the words are written. I'm a biological nerd and proud to admit it. But I'm also have learned to think about learning. And when I was a private consultant, I learned that people learn different ways. Some people learn hands-on. Some people learn by seeing a visual, seeing a map, seeing somebody do something, and other people learn by reading something. And so I was spending all this time on these big reports for these landowners, and some of the landowners weren't reading them. And I finally learned that if you've got a landowner that learns by reading, giving them a big report is good. If you have a landowner that learns by doing, you need to spend a lot more time on the land out there helping them do things so that they understand. And, you know, if you have a landowner that's a visual or a message that you're trying to get across to anybody who's a visual learner, pictures play a very, very important role. Here's a good example. I'm working on a nature-based tourism effort to get birders and bird photographers out on to Cat Island, Mississippi. And the caretaker in Cat Island sent me pictures this past Sunday of a summer tanager taking down and killing a male ruby-throated hummingbird. And that's pretty cool. And so I started going back in the literature, and there have been 2 examples of summer tanagers ever attacking a vertebrate. The first was in 1995, where a summer tanager that had just made his trans-Gulf migration across the Gulf of Mexico came to Horn Island and killed a Carolina anole. Killed it, didn't eat it. And then 15 years later, a male summer tanager flies across the Gulf of Mexico, comes to Cat Island, Mississippi, catches a hummingbird and kills it and doesn't eat it. And so we've submitted a note to the Mississippi Kite, the Mississippi Ornithological Association's journal, about that behavior, and he's got pictures of it, and the pictures just add so much to that story. So, you know, pictures are critical to our conservation movement moving forward, both to document what's there, and, you know, we use them to document whether it's an aerial photograph or whether it's taking pictures of a certain behavior. We use pictures to communicate, do all kinds of things. So yeah, pictures are a very important conservation tool, and that's where, you know, if you take pictures of stuff while you're out there doing stuff, you know, those pictures can have a big impact. And, you know, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, we've talked about some of my pictures there to help get messages across. And there's certain messages that we want to get across, and the pictures tell the story.
Awesome. I think you want to start your activity at 2, so I think you can go ahead and get started with that.
Yeah, guys. So thanks again. If you want to stay on, you can just hang out in here for a half hour. But we're going to have our folks from 2 to 2:30 go ahead and stretch your legs, get outside. Maybe Rob, you can actually go out and take some photos too if you want.
All right, what I'll do first is I'll go through the chat window here and answer all the questions that we didn't get to during the verbal part.
I think we got to most of them.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Just noticed this the other day. I didn't know it prior to this. I saw a crow antagonizing a red-shouldered hawk. Is that something you've seen pretty commonly? Crows going after other birds or larger ones?
Crows in particular are notorious. Crows and jays both are notorious for what we call mobbing, particularly owls, but also any of the other raptors, accipiters, owls, eagles, hawks. And it's called a mobbing behavior, and whether it's because they might predate the young or what, but the crows are notorious for mobbing and being noisy and harassing those kinds of critters.
Yeah, so I'm looking through the chat box. I see 3 questions that didn't get answered. So that's Amber, Adrienne, and John. So do you 3, if you still want to ask your question, go ahead. We'll start off with Amber.
So I have that question, but I also kind of have another one too. But that question was like talking about that focal equation that you had. How often do you actually have to use that, and when?
You use that concept very frequently. The pieces that feed into that equation are how far away you are from the subject and how long the lens is. And the closer you are to a subject or the longer your lens, the shallower the depth of field. And when you get up close, a lot of the bird pictures I take, I'm on the edge of my focal range, as close to them as I can get, so I can get the frame. And it's very hard to get enough depth of field there. Same thing for a lot of little bugs and flowers. I'm having to shoot tightened all the way down just to get enough depth of field so everything's sharp and in focus. Another place you use it is when you're taking a picture of a landscape. And I want to have as much detail in focus as possible. I have to figure out what point out there in the landscape can I focus so I have everything in focus. If you see all the pictures of all these birds and buildings and things in front of the beautiful full moon and everything's in focus, it's not real. There is no physical way that any camera that's been made so far can have a skyline and the moon, or a bird and the plane and the moon in sharp focus. It just doesn't work. And so I use a depth of field calculator to help me decide what f-stop, because the f-stop again affects shutter speed. How I can optimize and get the best picture I can. So we use that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily use the formula, but I use a table or use my knowledge of the table if you work with it enough that, okay, I want my 60 millimeter lens instead of my 200 millimeter.
Great. Adrian or John, you want to go next?
I will. So I'm into photography and everything. I don't really know a lot about it, but I'm also a scuba diver. And so most pictures I take are actually underwater. So I was wondering if you know anything about underwater photography.
It's orders of magnitude more difficult than above water photography. The bubbles that you put your camera in to take a good camera to carry it underwater are pretty expensive. They often cost more than the camera itself. I've got a couple of point and shoots that are waterproof down to way further than I can go. But so the hard part in underwater photography is you staying still, the subject moving, and then a lot of times there's stuff in the water between you and the subject that makes things more blurry. You've got lower light levels, especially if you get down below 8 or 10 feet. And then so if you're using flash to fill that, the stuff in between the flash and the subject casts shadows, and it's a lot more difficult than above in the air photography.
Great. And John, we'll let you ask your question before the activity.
Hey, I was just wondering, so what's your favorite thing to photograph?
I like to photograph things with fur, and then things with feathers, and then things with scales, and then I'll photograph plants and then people, even though people have fur.
Nice. All right. Anybody else want to ask a question before we start that activity?
I see Cody's question over here. What time of day would be best to photograph in a shaded forest area? I usually try to stay within the golden hour at sunset if I'm out in the open. That's when you're out west, it's easy to take good landscape pictures. Here in the south, it's a lot harder because all those trees get in the way. And then you've got the shaded areas and the light areas, and it's a real pain. As we was talking about earlier, an overcast day is a good choice a lot of times for taking pictures in a forest. If you're out in one of the frequently burned piney woods, the golden hour, early morning, late afternoon is still good. And that's what we call the golden hour, the hour after sunrise, an hour before sunset. Or a good overcast day is a good choice for taking forest pictures. That way you've got an even shade at the very least.
Awesome. Anything else? Go ahead, Eric.
Are we uploading these photos to anything to show them, or?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and explain if nobody has any other questions. Go ahead, Amber.
That picture, it's talking about the grids. Braylon told us that we can add it to our iPhone cameras, and I looked it up and did that. But I didn't exactly understand where to use it, when you're taking a picture, how exactly to frame it. That makes sense?
I didn't understand the question.
Using the grids, the laws of three
okay.
or whatever you're talking. Yeah.
Okay, so if you've got the grid up on your iPhone, then you put the points of emphasis at the things you're interested in. So if you're going to take a picture of a person, a portrait picture, you turn the iPhone vertically, I'd want those two crosses right there over my eyes, or at least that line right there where my eyes are at. If I can make it where it's my other eyes, the other lines, both sets of lines are coming through my eyes, I'm happier. So I'd put the lines on the horizon. If I want to focus on, let's say I'm going to take a picture of the Gulf and I wanted to focus on the water as being the main thing in the picture, I would put that. So I turn it horizontally, and I would put when you take a landscape picture, you don't want the horizon right through the middle. You want it on one of those third lines. So if the water's the important thing, then I'm going to have 1/3 sky and 2/3 water. If the sky is the important thing, I'm going to have 1/3 water and 2/3 sky. And so I'd put those lines where things are happening or where things are important in the picture, and try to put the eyes or the mouth or the point of action at one of those points of intersection in the grid. Good question.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Awesome. You can use that grid when you go outside right now to take some pictures. So we have the time from 2 to 2:30 slotted to get you guys outside to, put these skills to practice. We can bump it back an extra, I guess, like 5 minutes. So Eric, you mentioned, do we have to upload these? So you're going to go ahead and take at least one photo. Obviously, you can take a bunch of them and choose the best one, like Rob was saying. And you're going to email that to your leaders. Let's make sure we email those to the leaders by 2:35. And does everybody knows how to email a picture from their phone via email, right? I think we do. Okay. If you don't, contact your leaders, or you can stay on here and we can walk through that. And then right around 2:35, we'll jump back on here and kind of we'll have some time for people to share their photos if they want, and Rob can give us some more points.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you in a little bit.
Yeah, it is possible too to send pictures via email, via text message too, if you just type an email address into the thing.
There was a little bit of feedback going on there, Creighton. You want to repeat that?
Gotcha. I was saying it's possible to send pictures. I think the easiest way is you can type someone's email address right into the text message. Like a text message works the same way as an email. You can just type an email address right into your texting bar and send it to us that way too. It's actually probably easiest if you put our email address under our contacts and then send it to us that way.
Learning all kinds of stuff today. Awesome. Okay. Well, leaders, I will hang out on here. And Rob, you're welcome to go outside or come, stay on here, but we'll give everybody those 25 minutes. See. Looks like.
Can someone help me be able to sign into the app? Because whenever I try to, it keeps crashing. And whenever I try to do it the way Adrian says to do it, it just doesn't work. So.
What was that, Brian?
I said, can someone, help me sign into the app? Because whenever I try to do it with Google, it crashes. And whenever I try to do it the way Adrian, told us that, it worked for her, it just doesn't work.
So you're talking about this GoToMeeting app?
No, I'm talking about the other, what's it called? The map activity.
Oh, okay.
The Invasive one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's just focus on taking. So you don't need to use that app to take these photos. Let's just focus on what we're doing now, and we're going to touch on that after this.
Cool, got it.
Awesome, thanks, Bray.
Mm-hmm.
Be back shortly.
I think that's a negative. Let me see who we're missing. Some people never logged off, so I don't know people that don't have their webcams up if they're here or not. If you don't have your webcam up, say I if you're here.
Haley said she's here. Yeah, we'll give folks just another minute or two to hop on. I'll go ahead and give you the screen sharing capability, Creighton, since Ashley wanted to go first.
Cool. Should I go ahead and start sharing?
Yeah, we can go ahead and you can pull up Ashley's photo, and then we'll just wait until people start jumping on. Ooh, pretty.
Which one should I share? Both of them or one of them?
Yeah, you can share both of them. Preferably the first one if you're only gonna do one.
Okay.
Yeah, that one would work.
Yeah, Ashley, so do you want to just kind of maybe explain how you use some of the tips today with taking this image?
Sure. So first off, I was just shocked, like I said, to find out there was a blackberry bush beside my house. That was pretty interesting.
Where'd it go?
But I kind of listened to the lighting and trying to ignore the, not ignore, but limit any distractions. So I just really focused on that and tried to get more of like a even level instead of that like viewing over the top like I normally do. And I thought it turned out pretty cool.
Yeah. Rob, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. I think, the BlackBerry coming in and ending up at that one of those points of thirds intersections is good. The dead leaves in the upper right corner, if you'd done some manual Photoshop and smushed them back down under some green leaves, it'd be a more appealing image. But yeah, that BlackBerry says pick me.
Awesome. Yeah, I removed some, but I was afraid I was going to run out of time before being able to get back, so I didn't remove them all.
Cool. Let's look at Ashley's other picture too, if you don't mind, because there's something I left out of the other one.
Oh gosh, that one's not as good.
But it's not bad. That's an oxalis. It's one of the I can't remember the common names for it. But one of the things in taking flower pictures, one of the things to remember about, it helps with, although it's bad if people tell somebody to go away. But if things are in odd numbers, when you got a small group, 3s, 5s, or 7s, they look better than if they are. This one, there's really 5 flowers in this picture, but you can really only see 4 of them. If you had reached in there and picked 2 of those flowers, since this is a yard weed, those 3 flowers would have made a stronger image than these 5.
Okay.
And so having things in odd numbers, and so if you're putting people in the picture, putting 1, 3, or 5 often looks better than putting 2 or 4 or 6. Whatever reason, that's what, and it seems to work.
It's a good thing to remember. Thank you.
Cool. Any volunteers to go next?
Should we just keep going with crew 2 until crew 2 volunteers are out?
Probably easiest to do things that way.
Let's do maybe, so we are going to end at 3. Let's do like 2 or 3 more volunteers from crew 2, and then we'll switch over to crew 1.
Any volunteers from crew 2? I guess we'll do D and Amber. D, you raised your hand first, so are you the number that just sent me a picture? Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
This one?
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah, I have a rose bush that's like right outside, and it's really hard to take pictures of other stuff because right behind is my patio, which would have been a lot to manually Photoshop out. And on the other side is like the parking lot full of cars, and I thought those would look bad. But right underneath, what you can't see is my fingers right in between the thorns holding it because it's pretty windy outside right now.
Another good one. I mean, it's you're leaning in from the lower bottom corner, arching up through the image. You got the stem leading up to that point of intersection, the rule of thirds, the reds and the greens, and it sounds like you made the best of a bad situation from a background perspective. And that's a lot of times some of the pretty pictures may be taken right in town. It's just what you choose to show in the picture and what you choose not to show. So cool.
So I guess we'll go over to Amber. Wow, she's got a lot. Actually, what's this one? Holy cow! Do you want me to show all of them or just this one?
The other one's only got like 4.
Well, here's this image. We can go over that one first. I guess I
Yeah,
can briefly
Amber,
show the
why
other.
don't you show all 4? Because it looks like, did you do that for like a progression? I'd love you to.
I mean, I have that,
it.
but 2 of them are, I don't know, like they're 3 different ones. That's just at my house, and then the other 2 are my neighbors. Or the other 3 are my neighbors.
See, how do I move over? Okay, here we go. That's how I move over. So I'm still getting used to the sharing the screen with the GoToMeeting bars being in the way.
Yeah, the last one's my favorite because it shows the interaction between the little nymph brush Katie did and the roses, and again the leading lines of the stems of the roses coming up from the corner up to about the thirds, and the Katie did there at the intersection of the thirds. Cool shot.
Yeah, it was actually harder to take like that though because there was like another branch of rose bushes like in front of it, so I was having to like hold that back with like one arm, and then trying to take the picture with the other while like pressing the little focus dot with one hand. Yeah, it wasn't really working.
Yep. And so you saw I had the plamp and showing up in one of the pictures, did that on purpose, partly to show that we use those kinds of things. One of the things you can use in real life is get a pair of clothespins and take a piece of string and run it through the metal clip on the clothespins, the spring, and then you can put a clothespin around something and around the other end and pull it out of the way without, or you can just use string to tie it out of the way. But the clothespins give you a little more control sometimes. So I've got in my photo bag, I've got a clamp and I've got some clothespins with string running through them.
Cool. Do we want to show any more of Crew 2? Is anybody dying to show theirs before we hand it over to Crew 1? I can't really see hands, so speak up if you really want your photo analyzed.
I sent you something through email, Corey.
Okay. Did you want me to show it or?
Yeah, sure.
We'll do Cody and then pass things over to Crew 1. Nice. I knew it was going to be mushrooms of some sort.
Yeah, I couldn't find any outside earlier, so took a picture of the ones in my house. Yeah, these are pink oyster mushrooms. I didn't do the substrate myself, so I kind of ordered it offline from Organic Mushroom Grow Kits. But yeah, I kind of took into consideration as far as the rule of thirds and how these basically trail up to the bigger section up top, and I kind of really like that. I toyed with the temperature a little bit to make the color just seem more natural than it did.
Cool. Like I say, the leading lines going up through the thing. It's obviously part of a mushroom grow kit, which is cool in itself. The upper left corner is kind of real bright and having problems seeing what's up there, which is organic. If there would been the light had been diffused a little more, you might have gotten a little more color popping out of there and see more of that. That's pretty cool. One of one of the landowners I work with is Shroomdom up in Pearl River County, Mississippi. They're growing, I think, 17 different varieties of mushrooms for restaurants and such. Pretty cool people, but it's neat to see some of this.
Yeah, that's one of my dream hobbies. I wish I had land for. I really do.
They've got an $80,000 grow house that controls temperature, humidity, and they've got all these fancy ultraviolet lights in there growing all those mushrooms.
All right. Anybody from Crew One really dying to share?
Camille just put in a request to do hers.
Okay. She has a bunch of them. Do you want to show all of them?
Yeah, you can show all of them. And the thing is, okay, so on iNaturalist, I took pictures of like things that are around here. These are my favorite photos, and I really would appreciate some constructive criticism on this.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep, got it. Good picture of one of the big spreading live oaks with all the resurrection ferns on the branches. It's good to show that picture that's taken after a recent rains of the resurrection ferns there. You know, the live oak is the center of the picture. Everything's centered, and that isn't always a bad thing. If there were a way to show more of the picture, you know, put the trunk in one of the thirds, it might be better. It might not. But yeah, that's
So you
a
think
really
maybe
cool
like
picture
closer?
closer or scooting around from a little bit different angle, maybe. I like the lighting in this one. I like there's nothing I don't like about the picture. You know, it's a good representative picture. But you might try shooting it different ways just to see what additionally works for you. I mean, it may nothing work any better than this.
Thank you.
A pretty flower picture. It works. It shows you what's there. It shows you that this is a picture taken in a cultivated flower. You know, with I'm sure the concrete or the stepping stone down there isn't part of the picture. You know, you might get in so close that all you can see is petals, ray petals and flower petals. You know, you try that. You know, this one works as well.
Thank you. And that's what I was thinking too. The concrete kind of throws off the whole presence of the flower.
And again, a picture from an artistic perspective isn't necessarily the same as a picture from a biological perspective. A lot of times we need those extra pieces, need to see pieces of the leaf, need to see these other things in order to identify it. So an artistic picture and a biological picture are two different things. White top pitcher plants on a pitcher plant bog. The inflorescence coming across between you and the pitcher plants makes it a less attractive. I see some looks like pale pitcher plants or green pitcher plants back there too. Makes it a less attractive image from an image perspective, but it tells you more about the biological diversity of pitcher plant bogs. So it depends on what your use is.
And last one here from Camille.
What kind of lily is that, Camille?
Honestly, I have no idea. I just thought it was beautiful.
Is it out in the wild or is it?
That was actually at one of the sites we work at. It's a pitcher plant bog out in Fish River off of County Road 9.
Okay. Taken last summer?
I have no idea. Do what?
Taken last summer, late last fall, or now?
It was taken at the beginning of the season, so around September, October.
Okay.
Maybe.
So that's a pine lily. It's a fall blooming lily that grows in the wet pine flatwoods. Real cool. And that's an unusually shaped pine lily because they're usually a lot more. I can't tell if that's two blossoms or if it's one that's just malformed. But it's a real cool pine lily shot.
From my phone.
Nice. Who else
Very
wants
cool,
to
y'all.
go?
Looks like Eric wants to go.
Why am I not seeing these? Oh, is Eric raising his hand? Yeah, I can't see your faces.
Yeah, when you're
Well,
running the
yeah,
screen, you
almost.
can't see what everybody's doing. It's a pain.
I had
Yeah.
sent it to Brett. You want me to send it to you, Matt?
Yeah.
Yes, that'd be good. Why don't we look at mine while you're doing that?
Pretty cool. A best beetle. It's a
best-
beetle that grows lays its eggs and lives in decomposing hardwood logs. You can actually hear them, and a lot of times if you look up under between their thorax and their abdomen, they'll have little mites that are specific for that species of beetle, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Better
we found
picture.
the
So
thing
this
we logs.
this shows the picture and the beetle and the substrate where it lives. Getting in closer to it would make it a more appealing picture, but as it is, it's saying, okay, I found this beetle. So there's nothing wrong with the picture as it is either.
Yeah, I tried to. It was running around a lot, so I put it on a piece of wood, and I had to hold it so that I get the right angle. Yeah, I would prefer not to
Yep.
have my fingers in there, but yeah, as best I could do.
I've got a lot of pictures. That's the best I can do, and I want to do it again later.
All right, Eric, are you sending me a picture?
You can show mine if you want. I don't know. Yeah, you can this is the original. Yeah. Just go with that one. But it
Cool.
was kind of hard because it was really bright outside, and so I had to find like the one shady spot, and then I happened to have this little guy come down. So that's cool.
Cool. One of the damselflies,
Yeah.
and damselflies are really cool subjects, and sometimes you just can't get close enough to them to get a good picture. And if you could have gotten down on his level, put the camera down on the ground where it's facing him, you may have been able to pick up more detail. Again, what this tells me, it's probably something like one of the bluets that likes to hawk or hunt from the ground rather than hunting from a perch. But cool.
Yeah.
In good detail. I mean, you can see the veins in his wings and little hairs on his leg, and I mean, cool shot.
Yeah, Britt, you said that was the original. Did you do an edited version too? I know you're like a photography geek, so.
No, I didn't edit it. I had tried messing with cropping, but it honestly kind of changed the formatting because I was trying to get closer. Like I couldn't get my phone any closer without scaring it away, and but I did want to
Story of my life.
Yeah. So.
Do you want to show that other one, Matt? Brittany.
I was trying to, yeah, that was me cropping it more.
Cool.
And I was playing with the lines on it.
That's a more attractive picture from a picture perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And again, most of the time I shoot things with a little edge around them. When I take a picture, most of them are a 4x3, 4x3, 4x6, or a 2x3 format, and which works fine if you're going to print a 4x6 image. If you're going to print 11x14, then something's got to get cropped out. If you're going to print an 8x10, which is a 4x5 ratio, something's going to get cropped out. So usually I shoot something, or if you're doing an 8.5x11 for a magazine cover, something's going to get cropped out. So I don't shoot it like I'm eventually going to use it. I give it extra room to breathe all the way around it so that it can be used at a 4x6, an 8x10, an 8.5x11, 11x14 format later.
All right. Did you send it, Eric?
I don't have your Gmail.
Hey, Britt, did he send it to you? Because I can make you the presenter.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
How do you not have my email?
Eric,
You emailed me this morning? You emailed me this morning, didn't you? Yeah.
No, we were texting this morning.
No, you emailed me this morning. Right here. Eric Lucas IDP. My email.
Oh.
How do you not have my email?
Eric, I don't have your photo either.
Somebody else go. I'm figuring this out.
Eric, do you have it on your computer? Because I can make you the presenter and you can show it that way.
I can easily do that.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Let me pull up my Yahoo.
All right. While you're doing that real quick, I'm going to pull up Robert's contact information so you guys can have that. Is that fine, Robert, to share that? Just in case we don't get to everybody today and you want some advice, let me pull that up for you guys.
I got it. I got it pulled up.
Yeah, perfectly fine to share my contact info.
All right, Eric, you can go first.
All right. Let's not look at the bundles of email I have over there. Y'all see it?
You got to scroll down a little bit, but we can see the screen.
All right. I got to get y'all off my screen because I can't see nothing.
I have his email now.
All right. That's a miniature pit bull, you know. She looks really nice.
And a moving subject at that.
You're gonna be back, bro. Right. And she couldn't stay away from me in time for me to take the picture. This is a pitcher plant bog.
Eric, click on the pictures and make them full screen.
Okay. I'm trying. I'm tapping away. It's not happening. It's Yahoo. I'm sorry.
Wait, Britt, why don't you pull up the email since you got it?
I'm gonna run up on 45 get me some okra for my greens. I'm cooking greens today. I don't know if Mama knew. I'll let Mama know.
I got you though.
Cool. The first couple of pictures of the pit bull and the white top pitcher plant, those were both taken as landscapes or horizontals, and I think they'd have both fit a little bit better vertically. There's one that's a pitcher plant vertical. You know, those are vertical subjects and they work well vertically. I liked the placement of the eyes on the dog and the placement of the intersection with the pitcher plant there. It certainly works.
Awesome. See, that was taken at Langham Park, and it was very hard. I was working with Camille that day, and we was picking up. I think that is a camellia though.
That's what it looks like, and it looks, you know, very cool. If you could have got her to change out of that black jacket and put on a pretty dark green jacket where you had better complementary color, it would have enhanced the picture. And again, that's not real life. That's most of the time we don't have the chance to do that. But looks like a cool picture as shot and presented.
Thank you. It is you, Camille. It is.
Did anyone else from Crew One want to share? All right.
And real quick, I just pulled up Robert's contact information if you guys want to write that down and email him. He's good to, hold on, let me pull that up. Yeah, there you go. So maybe not everybody send him like actual mail, but oh, it's cool. You got your
whatever
sites on here too. So yep. Everybody feel free to reach out to him, and we're
anytime.
About to be done for the day, but I'll open it up real quick for any last minute questions. If we don't have that, I just want to say thanks again, Robert, and I think this was an awesome way to spend Earth Day, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all spending time with me today. And I see Boris's question. I don't know of any positions that Wildlife Mississippi has open right now or that we anticipate opening in the near future, but you can always check our website, and we send them out to particularly the Texas Job Board and all the job boards, and send them out via email. So good question, and we'll keep it going.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Hope you have a great Earth Day, Hump Day, rest of your week.
Y'all too. Be good.